Welcome back to BIM Heroes Radio. This is week 2 of our leadership development program. And this week we are talking about emotional intelligence in leadership.
Oh, this is a good one.
Yeah, we've got a whole stack of articles
Huh.
from BIM Heroes community leaders. And they're each exploring kind of a different facet of this really crucial skill set.
You know, it's interesting. What's really fascinating about this is that all these articles highlight the increasing importance of emotional intelligence, especially for those of you out there leading the AEC industry into the future.
Yes, it's not just about technical prowess anymore, right?
Right.
It's about something much bigger than that.
Absolutely.
So to set the stage, let's start with Ralph Montague.
Okay.
He's the director of ArcDox and BIM Coordinator Summit and the founder of the BIMHero.io community. And in his introductory piece, he outlines the 5 core components of emotional intelligence as they relate to leadership.
Yeah. And he starts with self-awareness, which is essentially understanding your own emotions and how they impact your thoughts and behaviors. And then there's self-regulation, the ability to manage those emotions, especially in challenging situations.
Right, so you don't just react impulsively. You can take a breath, make a conscious decision about how to respond.
Yep.
Montague also talks about motivation, but not just any motivation. He highlights the importance of intrinsic motivation, that inner drive to achieve something for its own sake.
And that ties in nicely with the next 2 components, empathy and social skills. Empathy is about understanding and sharing the feelings of others, while social skills allow you to build and maintain strong relationships, which are critical for effective leadership.
It's like all these pieces fit together to create a leader who is not only competent, but also compassionate and connected to their team.
A well-rounded leader.
Now let's dive a little deeper into self-awareness with Andrijana Nasteska. She's an information manager at NIRAS. And she argues that self-awareness is not a destination, but rather a continuous journey. What do you think about that?
I think Nasteska makes a crucial point. You know, it's not about achieving some level of perfect self-awareness and then calling it a day. It's an ongoing process of self-reflection and growth. And she highlights 3 key challenges that we often face in developing self-awareness. So first, there's mastering self-observation, which means becoming more aware of how your actions and behaviors, and even your feelings, impact yourself and those around you. It's almost like taking a step back and observing yourself objectively.
It reminds me of that saying, awareness is the first step to change. If you're not aware of your own patterns and behaviors, how can you even begin to modify them?
Exactly.
The second challenge Nasteska brings up is knowing when to hit the pause button.
Ooh, that's a good word.
Especially in the heat of a discussion or when emotions are running high. That could be tough, though.
Yeah.
Especially in a fast-paced environment like the AEC industry.
It is.
Where deadlines are always looming and decisions need to be made quickly.
Right.
So how do you find that balance between taking a moment to collect yourself and keeping things moving forward?
That's where self-regulation comes in. And it's something that Ahmad Firoozi, an architect and BIM coordinator at Asooarch, explores in depth in his article. He emphasizes the importance of managing disruptive emotions and impulses so you can make thoughtful decisions, especially when faced with challenging situations.
And Firoozi actually points out the consequences of poor self-regulation. They're not pretty.
No, they're not.
He talks about things like overreactions, emotional outbursts, even letting negative emotions linger and fester.
Right, and that can be detrimental, not only to your own well-being, but also to the overall morale and productivity of your team.
So Firoozi's basically saying that to be an effective leader, you have to master your own emotions before you can effectively lead others.
It's like putting on your own oxygen mask first, before assisting others.
I like that analogy. What are some of the specific strategies that he suggests for developing that self-regulation muscle?
Well, he recommends a combination of approaches. One is cultivating mindfulness, which helps you become more aware of your thoughts and feelings in the present moment. He also talks about stress management techniques, such as exercise, deep breathing, or spending time in nature. And he stresses the importance of strong social connections, which provide support and help us regulate our emotions.
So it sounds like Firoozi is advocating for a holistic approach to self-regulation, taking care of the mental,
emotional,
and even physical well-being.
Exactly. It's all interconnected.
Now let's shift gears and talk about motivation.
Okay.
We have 2 fascinating perspectives on this, starting with Daria Zimovets, a BIM specialist at NIIAT. She focuses on this idea of striving for achievement for its own sake, and how emotional intelligence can actually amplify that drive.
Yeah, that's a really interesting connection.
Can you unpack that a bit more for our listeners?
Sure. So Zimovets argues that when you're self-aware and able to regulate your emotions, you're less likely to be derailed by setbacks or negative feedback. You can stay focused on your goals even when things get tough because you understand your emotional responses to challenges and can manage them effectively.
So it's like having a strong internal compass that keeps you on track, even when the seas get rough.
Yeah, love that analogy.
And then we have Maulik Gangani, senior BIM expert at Tata Consulting Engineers Limited, who delves into the concept of intrinsic motivation. He argues that this inner drive is what fuels entrepreneurial and inspirational leadership.
Yeah.
Gangani actually makes a powerful statement about this. He says that leaders who are driven by passion, by that inherent desire to achieve and grow, are more likely to persevere through challenges and inspire those around them.
And I think that resonates with a lot of people. You know, we're drawn to leaders who are genuinely excited about what they do, who have that spark of passion that ignites others.
They're the ones who lead by example, not just telling people what to do, but showing them what's possible through their own enthusiasm and dedication.
Exactly.
Now, before we move on to empathy and social skills, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this idea of intrinsic motivation. Have you seen that play out in your own experience as a leader?
You know, what I've observed is that when people are genuinely passionate about their work, they're more resilient, more creative, and more willing to go the extra mile. They're not just showing up for a paycheck. They're invested in the bigger picture, and that makes all the difference.
It's that sense of purpose that really drives them.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to empathy and social skills, starting with a unique perspective from Erica Crandon. She's a project manager at Boeing.
Okay.
And Crandon explores the interplay between different emotional polarities that I find really fascinating. She talks about things like courtesy versus aggression, kindness versus indifference, and respect versus disrespect.
So it's not just about being nice all the time, but rather about understanding this whole spectrum of human emotions and how they interact.
So how does she suggest we use this understanding of emotional polarities in a leadership context?
She argues that recognizing and understanding these polarities can be incredibly valuable when navigating the complexities of human interaction, especially in the workplace. For example, she suggests that if a colleague is being aggressive, instead of mirroring that aggression, try responding with courtesy. This can de-escalate the situation and shift the emotional dynamic in a more positive direction.
So it's almost like using emotional intelligence to judo flip a negative situation into a more constructive one.
Exactly. It's about being aware of the emotional undercurrents and using that awareness to create positive change.
Okay. I think this is a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground already. From self-awareness to motivation and this intriguing concept of emotional polarities.
We have. And we still have more to unpack, though. In part 2, we'll delve further into leadership, exploring Ralph Montague's thoughts on freedom, courage, and transcending negative emotions.
So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after a short break. Don't forget to subscribe to BIM Heroes Radio on YouTube and Spotify for more insightful deep dives into topics that matter to AEC professionals. And join the free leadership program and community site on bimhero.io for more resources and discussions.
Welcome back to our deep dive into emotional intelligence and leadership. Before we move on, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've discussed so far.
Yeah, we've talked about the 5 core components of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, and how they all contribute to effective leadership.
We also explored some of the challenges in developing self-awareness and the importance of mastering self-regulation, especially in those high-pressure situations.
Right, and how those skills tie into motivation, particularly intrinsic motivation, which seems to be a powerful driving force for inspirational leaders.
And we finished up with Erica Crandon's fascinating insights into emotional polarities and how understanding those dynamics can help us navigate complex interactions.
Now let's shift our focus to Ralph Montague's article on leadership and freedom. He makes this really thought-provoking argument that freedom is an inherent human right and how that concept impacts our understanding of leadership.
Yeah, he really challenges that traditional master and slave dynamic that can sometimes exist between leaders and followers. Instead, Montague proposes a relationship built on mutual respect for each other's freedom and dignity.
So rather than controlling their teams, leaders should focus on empowering them. That's a pretty radical shift in perspective, wouldn't you say?
It is, and it requires a different kind of leadership, one that's less about authority and more about collaboration. Montague actually goes on to outline the rights and responsibilities of both leaders and followers within this framework.
I'm curious to hear more about that. What does he say about the responsibilities of leaders?
Well, Montague believes that leaders are responsible for creating an environment that fosters growth and development for their team members. They need to provide opportunities for learning, encourage creativity and innovation, and empower their teams to take ownership of their work.
And what about the followers? What are their responsibilities in this model of leadership?
He argues that followers have a responsibility to actively engage in their own growth and development. They need to be proactive, take initiative, and be willing to learn and adapt. It's a two-way street with both leaders and followers contributing to a shared vision.
It sounds like he's advocating for a more collaborative and less hierarchical approach to leadership, where everyone has a role to play and a voice that deserves to be heard.
That's exactly right. He envisions a community of empowered individuals working together towards a common goal.
Now, building on this idea of freedom and empowerment, Montague also explores the concept of transcending negative emotions, which he argues is crucial for courageous leadership.
He acknowledges that negative emotions are inevitable in any workplace, especially in a demanding field like AEC. But he suggests that instead of suppressing or ignoring those emotions, we need to acknowledge and accept them.
So it's not about trying to be positive all the time, but rather about learning to manage and even leverage those negative emotions.
Precisely. He believes that understanding and accepting our negative emotions is actually essential for growth and resilience.
And how does that tie into the concept of courage?
Well, Montague argues that courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the ability to act despite fear. He sees courage as choosing to move forward even when faced with challenges or setbacks, and using those experiences as fuel for positive change.
So he seems to be suggesting that the ability to face and overcome those negative emotions is what ultimately allows us to become more courageous leaders.
Exactly. It's about developing that inner strength and resilience to persevere even when things get tough.
Now, I'm curious to hear from you as someone who has studied leadership extensively. How do you see the connection between emotional intelligence and courage?
Well, I believe emotional intelligence is the foundation for courage. When you're self-aware, you understand your fears and insecurities. Self-regulation allows you to manage your emotional responses to those fears, preventing them from paralyzing you.
And then motivation, particularly intrinsic motivation, provides that inner drive to push forward even when you're feeling afraid or uncertain.
Exactly. And empathy allows you to understand and connect with the fears and concerns of others, which can be incredibly empowering for a team.
It's like all these elements of emotional intelligence come together to create a leader who is not only competent but also courageous and capable of inspiring others to face their own fears and achieve great things.
Absolutely. And to bring it all together, in his summary of Week 2's theme, Ralph Montague highlights the 5 enduring characteristics of leadership.
And those are?
Visionary, inspirational, authentic, resilient, and balanced.
I see how those qualities align with everything we've been discussing about emotional intelligence. A leader who is self-aware and able to manage their emotions is more likely to be authentic and resilient, and those who are intrinsically motivated and empathetic tend to be more inspirational and visionary.
That's a great observation. And when you cultivate all of these qualities, you're well on your way to becoming a truly balanced and effective leader.
Now, before we wrap up Part 2, I want to bring it back to our listeners and pose a question for reflection. We've talked about courage in the context of leadership, but how does courage show up in your everyday work?
Think about those moments when you face a challenge or feel a sense of fear or uncertainty. How do you respond? Do you shy away from those difficult situations, or do you find a way to push through and act despite your fears?
And how can you leverage your emotional intelligence to become more courageous in those moments? It's something to think about as we head into Part 3, where we'll explore some practical strategies for applying emotional intelligence in your everyday work. Welcome back to our deep dive into emotional intelligence and leadership. We've explored the core components, delved into self-awareness and self-regulation, and even touched upon freedom, courage, and those 5 enduring characteristics of a great leader.
Now let's shift gears a bit and focus on some practical applications of emotional intelligence, specifically in the AEC industry.
Perfect, because knowing about these concepts is one thing.
Yeah.
But actually putting them into practice is where the real magic happens, right?
Absolutely. And one of the most crucial areas where emotional intelligence comes into play is communication.
We all know that clear and effective communication is essential for successful projects.
Yeah.
But how does emotional intelligence take communication to the next level?
It's about going beyond simply conveying information. It's about understanding the emotional context of the message, considering the other person's perspective, and responding in a way that builds trust and rapport.
So it's not just about what you say, but also how you say it and how you make the other person feel.
Exactly. Think about it. When you're communicating with your team, clients or stakeholders, you're not just dealing with facts and figures, you're interacting with people who have their own emotions, perspectives, and motivations.
And being able to tune into those emotional undercurrents can make a world of difference in how your message is received.
Absolutely. Active listening is a key skill here. It's not just about hearing the words someone is saying, but truly understanding their message, both verbally and non-verbally.
So paying attention to their tone of voice, body language, facial expressions can give you just as much information as the words themselves.
Precisely. It's about being present in the moment, asking clarifying questions, and reflecting back what you've heard to ensure understanding.
And this all ties back to empathy, right? That ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes and see things from their perspective.
Empathy is crucial, especially when dealing with conflict, which is inevitable in any workplace.
Especially in the fast-paced, often high-pressure environment of the AEC industry.
Exactly. When conflicts arise, emotional intelligence can help us navigate those challenging conversations constructively.
So instead of reacting defensively or trying to win the argument, we can use our emotional intelligence to listen to the other person's concerns, validate their feelings, and find common ground.
Remember, conflict isn't always a bad thing. It can actually be an opportunity for growth, innovation, and stronger relationships if we approach it with emotional intelligence.
That's such an important point. Now, beyond communication and conflict resolution, emotional intelligence also plays a vital role in building strong relationships.
So those relationships are the foundation of any successful team.
When we're emotionally intelligent, we can connect with others on a deeper level, build trust and rapport, and create a more positive and supportive work environment.
Remember those 5 enduring characteristics of leadership that Ralph Montague identified.
Visionary, inspirational, authentic, resilient, and balanced.
Yes. Emotional intelligence is the key
Yeah.
to cultivating all of those qualities.
It helps us inspire and motivate our teams, lead with authenticity and integrity,
Yeah.
navigate challenges with resilience, and create a more harmonious and productive work environment.
It's like emotional intelligence gives you the tools to become the best leader you can be.
Well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to emphasize that developing emotional intelligence is a journey, not a destination.
It is. It's a continuous process of self-discovery,
Right.
growth, and learning.
And every step you take toward greater emotional intelligence will benefit not only you as a leader, but also your team and the entire organization. So keep learning, keep practicing, and keep growing. And for those of you who are eager to continue exploring this topic, we encourage you to join the free leadership programming community on BIMHero.io.
Yes, it's a fantastic resource filled with insights, articles, and discussions to support you on your leadership journey.
And don't forget to subscribe to BIM Heroes Radio on YouTube and Spotify for more insightful deep dives into topics that matter to AEC professionals.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into emotional intelligence and leadership. Until next time, keep leading with heart and smarts.